My name is Tanner Anderson. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Please remember to subscribe and let's count down the top 25 highest paid NFL players for the 2025 season. Let's hit it. You see, when I think of the city of Tampa, I think of unemployed white people with face tattoos and gold teeth that marry their first cousin. But one person that resides in this beautiful Florida city that is not unemployed is Baker Mayfield, a man whose career was in free fall after an unceremonious exodus from Cleveland. He then decided, for some godforsaken reason, to go to Carolina where careers go to die. But he was given a lifeline, you see. The Los Angeles Rams called and they said, hey, our star quarterback, Matthew Stafford, he's injured. Can you come be the backup? In like 3 days notice, he's like, sure, I'll be there. Holy shit. I'm starting on Monday Night Football with the entire world watching. Don't worry about it. Hold my beer. I'm going to put on a show and lead us to victory. And that one performance arguably saved Baker Mayfield's career in the NFL because the Tampa Bay Buccaneers that offseason, they called him up and they said, hey, Baker, do you want to come down here and prove yourself? And Baker's like, yeah, I think this might be my last shot in the NFL. Let's do it. Cool. You're going to get paid like a backup quarterback. 1 year, $4 million. And Baker Mayfield once again said, hold my beer. I got this. So he went into Tampa Bay and he blew everybody out of the water. This guy, he completely surpassed expectations, playing his best football of his career, leading the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to a division title and a playoff victory. So the Bucs, they said, man, we really like your moxie, your leadership, how you won over the locker room. Let's give you a 3-year, $100 million contract that includes $50 million in guaranteed salary and a signing bonus of nearly $29 million. And then last season, when once again he outplayed this contract, it quickly became one of the best value contracts in the entire NFL. As a Minnesota sports masochist who is a diehard of all of my hometown teams, I was never buying this Sam Darnold hype. It reminded me a lot of Christian Ponder, where everybody was telling me, hey, this guy, look at what he's doing on the field. He's leading them to victories. You have to believe in what he's doing. But then I would look at it and I go, you know what? Christian Ponder, he just drops back and he hands the ball off to one of the greatest running backs of all time about 30 times a game. So, of course, I could even look good doing that. Actually, no, I couldn't. I'm not very good at football and I don't like to get hit and have concussion issues. But Sam Darnold, of course he's going to look good. He has a quarterback guru as his coach, a fantastic offensive line, and arguably the best weapons in the NFL. So if this guy didn't suck at football, he's going to put up some numbers. And in his one season with the Minnesota Vikings, he took a gamble on himself. 1 year, $10 million deal. And he more than lived up to that gamble because after rookie J.J. McCarthy went down in the preseason, the job, it was handed to him on a silver platter. And he went out there and he led the Vikings to a 14-3 regular season record. However, we all know what happens next. Sam Darnold, he showed his true colors in the final week of the season with the division title on the line. He totally shit the bed against the Detroit Lions. And then he's like, you know what? You thought that was bad? Hold my beer. I'm going to do even worse on Monday Night Football in the first round of the playoffs against the Los Angeles Rams. And these two performances, they arguably cost Sam Darnold around $40 million. However, even though the aforementioned quarterback guru said to himself, you know what? I don't really want to coach this guy anymore. We're not even going to offer him a contract. That didn't stop the Seattle Seahawks saying, hey, you know what? Let's blow up this entire thing. Trade Geno Smith to the Las Vegas Raiders and sign this guy to a 3-year, $100 million contract with over $37 million guaranteed. What could possibly go wrong? Guys, I think that we should all feel really bad for the San Francisco 49ers. It must be so tough to be so good at your job that you draft too many good players that all come up for contract at the same time, that you get into salary cap hell and you have to choose which ones you want to retain. That must be so hard for you guys to have such a well-run organization. But I have a feeling that one player that wasn't too much of a decision whether you're going to retain him or not was the former number 2 overall pick that was a former defensive player of the year as well in Nick Bosa. But you guys kind of saw your cap sheet and you said, I don't know if we can pay him on average $34 million a year. So he was required to hold out in order to get his just due. And you called him up and like, hey, Nick, why don't you come to off-season OTAs? He's like, hey, no, I'm cool. I'm going to sit over here and I'm going to work out independently until you pay me my money. Which, of course, they ended up doing to the tune of 5 years, $170 million with $122.5 million in guaranteed money and a $50 million signing bonus at the time. This was the largest contract in NFL history for a non-QB, a contract that was just recently surpassed by Max Crosby. But Nick Bosa, ever since he signed this deal, he has been a little bit injured. Something that hasn't occurred since his second season in the NFL where he tore his ACL, and they may have another decision as to whether they want to pay for a guy $34 million a year that is never playing on the field. I really wonder how that woman is doing that was with CeeDee Lamb on draft night. The one you know that he was very, very clearly cheating on. I wonder if she ever sits back and thinks about her life and wonders to herself, you know what? Maybe I should have put up with his infidelity because I would have been set for life. Beautiful woman, by the way. I really hope that she's doing well. Somebody that is doing well is CeeDee Lamb. This dude was drafted the same year as Justin Jefferson, but Jerry Jones is one cheap bastard who doesn't like to pay up for his star players. So he said, you know what? The Minnesota Vikings, they made this really easy on Justin. We're going to give him the largest non-quarterback deal in NFL history. But CeeDee, no, you're putting up similar numbers. We're not going to do that for you. We're going to make you sweat it out, which they did, which also did not make CeeDee Lamb very, very happy. But in the end, when you're that talented, you get what you want. 4 years, $136 million. That included $100 million in guaranteed money and a signing bonus of $38 million. However, if I were a Dallas Cowboys fan, I would be a bit concerned. You see, the duo of CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott, that is the most expensive duo in the entire NFL. Just ahead of Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. Let me ask you, do you think if Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb are your two best players, you have any shot of actually winning a Super Bowl? Is it possible for a man making $35 million a year that set the NFL record for highest paid wide receiver when he signed this contract back in 2024 to actually be underpaid? I know that I'm biased because I'm a diehard Minnesota Vikings fan, but if this guy is not the best wide receiver in the NFL, he is easily the most consistent. He has only been injured one time in his entire career, but every single season that he has not been injured, he has posted over 1,400 yards in that campaign. Through his first 5 years in the NFL, Justin Jefferson, he has the most receiving yards in NFL history. So when you give him a 4-year, $140 million contract that included $110 million in guaranteed money, plus $89 million signing bonus, you'd think, whoa, this is a lot of money, so a lot of expectations for this guy to live up to. But if you're Justin Jefferson, you do that, and you surpass it. So is he actually underpaid, especially when you consider the Minnesota Vikings still have a rookie quarterback throwing him the ball? I don't think the greatest accomplishment of Max Crosby's life was becoming a 4th-round pick out of Eastern Michigan or completely surpassing expectations and getting 2 massive deals in the NFL or making 4 consecutive Pro Bowls. No. I think the greatest accomplishment of Max Crosby's life was deciding to get sober on March 11th, 2020. Are you loco en la cabeza, Holmes? That is the very day that the entire world shut down due to the COVID-19 global pandemic. And while everybody else in society was like, hey, where's my beer at? I'm gonna drink 40 of those motherfuckers. Max Crosby's like, no, I'm cool. You can hold my beer, son. I'm over here because I'm built different. And this dude, he's maintained his sobriety ever since. And to mark the 2-year anniversary of his sobriety, the Raiders gave him a 4-year, $98 million deal. But just 2 years after signing that deal, they're like, wow, man, this guy is really built different. He's completely surpassed expectations. They decided to give him an extension this past summer. 3 years and $106 million. But that's not where it ends, because in that deal, he got $91 million in guaranteed money, plus He got a $58 million signing bonus. I guess it pays to be sober after all. Am I right, Max Crosby? Being healthy in the NFL is a skill, and there is no denying that Danielle Hunter is an absolute monster on the football field when he is actually healthy. And I know as a diehard Minnesota Vikings fan, I am projecting some of my frustrations with Danielle Hunter because oftentimes when he was wearing the purple jersey, he was not available due to injury. But one man's trash is another man's treasure. So the Houston Texans, they decided to sign him in free agency to a 2-year, $49 million contract a few seasons ago. And the Vikings, they didn't even offer him a deal, letting him walk for nothing in free agency because they had concerns over his injury history. But early returns on that bet by the Houston Texans, they're pretty damn good because in his first season with his new team, he started 17 games. He recorded 12 sacks. He was tied for 5th in the NFL in tackles. So the Texans are like, man, you are really underpaid as being one of the best defensive ends in the entire league. So let's up your salary for this season from $12 million up to $35.6 million, meaning Danielle Hunter, he is the second highest paid defensive player in the entire NFL. Derek Carr said that he was going to forfeit his $37.5 million in salary from the New Orleans Saints because he had to have shoulder surgery and he was going to miss the entire season, and he felt guilty about taking their money without playing, so he decided to retire instead and forfeit that money. But I'm not buying it totally. I dug into this a little bit and let's crunch some numbers. But before we do that, can we talk about Derek Carr and Kirk Cousins' agents, how they belong in the NFL Hall of Fame, how they've gotten their two clients so much money over the course of their career, despite both of them being mediocre at their profession? Back to Derek Carr for a second. You see, he signed a 4-year, $150 million contract a few years ago. He retired on May 10th. But on March 8th, the New Orleans Saints, they asked him to restructure his contract with more guaranteed money up front because they wanted to save on the salary cap. So, on March 8th, the New Orleans Saints gave him $60 million in a signing bonus so they could save $20 million in a cap hit. So Derek Carr, even though the aesthetic of everything is, yes, I'm a good Christian man, I'm going to waive $37.5 million from the New Orleans Saints because I feel guilty about taking their money and not playing a game. Well, back 2 months prior to retiring and making this decision, he made $60 million. Over the course of his career, he made $205 million. So let's not cry poor for Derek Carr now, shall we? There was a moment last offseason, it looked like the Rams and star quarterback Matthew Stafford, they were headed to a divorce, probably because they were just sick of him wearing disgusting baseball hats in the post-game press conference. But the 37-year-old franchise quarterback, he wanted a new contract, and the Rams are like, well, we've already had our star defensive player Aaron Donald retire a few seasons prior. Plus, we let our star wide receiver Cooper Kupp go home to the state of Washington and sign with our rival Seattle Seahawks. Maybe it's time we turn the page and start a new era of Los Angeles Rams football. But then just prior to the NFL draft, with Matthew Stafford reportedly going to either the Las Vegas Raiders or the New York Giants, the Rams and Stafford magically agreed on a new 2-year, $84 million contract with $80 million in guaranteed money. Meaning, this season, Matthew Stafford, he is getting paid $40 million. And next year, at the age of 38, he's going to make $44 million. Fun fact, when a star player is up for a new contract and the negotiation isn't going the way that they wanted, you can almost guarantee they are going to publicly demand a trade from that team, even if that star player once hit an opposing quarterback in the head with a helmet. Because Myles Garrett, he used this playbook down to a T. And the Cleveland Browns, they relented, giving him a 4-year, $160 million contract with $123.5 million in guaranteed money, making him the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history at the time. And it's pretty ironic that this deal came about just 5 weeks after Myles Garrett said he wanted to be traded from the Cleveland Browns and he would not re-sign with them under any circumstance, and he was even willing to sit out games and forfeit money until he was traded. Yeah, It's kind of funny how your tune changes once you get generational wealth, because after he signed this deal, Myles Garrett, he said there was nowhere else he'd rather be than Cleveland, and he wanted to bring the city a Super Bowl. And funniest yet, he said he felt the Browns were actually really close to winning a Super Bowl. Yeah, buddy, Pinocchio's not even believing your lies. The Cincinnati Bengals are not only the cheapest team in the NFL, but they also have the poorest owners and arguably one of the dumbest front offices, because they have 3 players in Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, and Ja'Marr Chase that make up 44.4% of their entire salary cap. And I don't know if you guys know this, but those 3 players, they are all on the offensive side of the ball, meaning their defense is in complete shambles, a sieve to say the least, which is awesome for all of us who play fantasy football, but not too great if you're a Cincinnati Bengals fan and you want your team to win games. I mean, to make matters worse, they decided to pay their number 2 receiver, T. Higgins, over their star defensive end, Trey Hendrickson. But none of this is Ja'Marr Chase's problem, because after he lit up the NFL the previous season, winning the Triple Crown, he would go on to get a contract from the Bengals that was the biggest in NFL history for a non-quarterback, signing a 4-year, $161 million deal that included a $48.1 million signing bonus and $128 million in guaranteed money, breaking his former LSU teammate's record, Justin Jefferson, for the biggest contract for a wide receiver in NFL history. Guys, I think that we should strongly consider putting Kirk Cousins' agent, Mike McCarthy, in the Sports Hall of Fame, because this dude has got his client absolutely paid at every step of his mediocre career. And as a diehard Minnesota Vikings fan, let me tell you how mediocre Kirk Cousins is. But doesn't matter. 14 NFL seasons, he has made $331 million. And you'd think, as a 35-year-old quarterback on the final season of his contract with the Minnesota Vikings, when you ruptured your Achilles tendon, there probably wasn't going to be much of a market for you in the offseason. But if you're Kirk Cousins and his agent Mike McCarthy, that's all laughable to you, because there is always a market for Kirk Cousins. He has shown us time and time again. And insert the Atlanta Falcons, who gave him a 4-year, $180 million contract with $100 million in guaranteed money. And I'm fairly certain, almost immediately after he signed this deal, the Atlanta Falcons, they had buyer's remorse. They're probably watching him in the facility trying to rehab his injury, and they're like, oh shit, I don't think he's ever going to be back to his mediocre self. So in that draft a few weeks later, they picked number 8 overall Michael Penix Jr. And just 15 games into his rookie season, he overtook Kirk Cousins. So Kirk Cousins, he is now easily the most expensive backup in the entire NFL. It's kind of crazy to think that a dude who is about to make $500 million over the course of the next decade could actually be considered underpaid. But that's exactly what Patrick Mahomes is. He is the best bargain in all of football. And unlike LeBron James in basketball, this dude has the potential to actually go down as the greatest to ever do it. However, there are still 12 quarterbacks in the NFL that are better compensated than Patrick Mahomes. That's over 1/3 of the league that is making more money at their position than Patrick Mahomes is. And almost immediately, when he signed a 10-year, $450 million contract back in 2020, people were like, yo, this is going to age really well for the Kansas City Chiefs, because he almost immediately became underpaid. But in 2023, they restructured the contract, giving him more money up front, but lengthening the term length by 2 years. So that means around 2028, Patrick Mahomes, he's probably going to set a record for the biggest contract in the history of the sport. This is easily the worst contract in the history of the NFL, and easily the worst trade in the history of the NFL. And to make matters worse, if you're a Cleveland Browns fan, Deshaun Watson, he's not going to play this entire season due to a ruptured Achilles tendon. But after this year, he still has one more year on his 5-year, $230 million, fully guaranteed contract he signed back in 2022 when the Browns acquired him from the Houston Texans. So it's pretty unlikely that Deshaun Watson will ever play another snap for the Cleveland Browns, but over the course of his 3 disastrous seasons, he started 19 games. He went 9-10 and looked absolutely terrible in the process. Nothing like the guy we saw in Houston. And to make matters even worse, the Cleveland Browns, they traded the entire farm in order to get this guy. 6 draft picks overall, including 3 in the first round. And to make matters even worse, he had 20 counts of sexual assault against him at the time. So when Browns owner Jimmy Haslam gave him this ridiculous fully guaranteed contract, it actually pissed off the other 31 owners in the NFL because they thought it might set a new precedent. Well, thankfully, it didn't. Instead, it's just been the gift that keeps on giving for the Cleveland Browns. It's been one disaster after another. But there is a silver lining because he is hurt this season, so I guess they can go collect insurance money on his contract. When this dude runs, he looks like a toddler who stole Halloween candy. One of the most disappointing players in the entire NFL who hasn't even come close to justifying his ridiculous 5-year, $230.5 million contract he signed back in 2022. But it's kind of hard to have sympathy for the Arizona Cardinals because they knew what they were getting themselves into. It's why they had to put a clause in his contract that stated that he was required to study film. I mean, the guy's a fucking quarterback in the NFL, and you had to put a clause in his contract that required him to study film? What great NFL quarterback in history wasn't a film junkie? Kyler Murray would much rather be playing Call of Duty than crunching the tape. So that's a pretty big red flag. Plus, he is slight of frame and very undersized in an extremely physical game. So his health has always been a concern, something that came to fruition just months after he signed this contract, tearing his ACL, which made him miss the rest of the 2022 season and part of the 2023 season. His deal includes the first no-trade clause in Philadelphia Eagles franchise history. And Jalen Hurts, when he signed this 5-year, $255 million contract back in 2023, that included $179.1 million in guaranteed money and a $28 million signing bonus, making him the highest paid player on an annual basis in NFL history. A lot of people viewed it as a massive overpay because nobody really thought that Jalen Hurts was actually a star quarterback, more of a game manager who was the beneficiary of a great organization that put fantastic teams around him, despite leading the Eagles to the playoffs every single season of his career, including already to 1 Super Bowl appearance. However, this past season, Jalen Hurts, he put all of those doubters to rest, absolutely steamrolling through the playoffs, including the Super Bowl, leading his team to a championship, himself a Super Bowl MVP, where they totally dominated Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. Not too bad for a guy that supposed draft experts had concerns over his ability to play quarterback at the next level, with many saying that he should strongly consider switching positions to either running back or wide receiver. And that is why he dropped so far in the NFL draft. But let's not act like the Baltimore Ravens didn't have their concerns either, because Lamar Jackson, he was actually their second first-round pick of that draft. They took a tight end before they took him. And when he was up for a contract extension, a former MVP, you'd think they'd just hand him over a boatload of cash, but they dragged out the process. They were unwilling to give Lamar Jackson a big contract extension without a fight, to the point the Atlanta Falcons called up the Baltimore Ravens and like, hey man, is Lamar Jackson on the trading block? And the Baltimore Ravens are like, well, no, we'll never state it publicly, but if the price is right, he is. And the Atlanta Falcons are like, well, what is the price? And the Baltimore Ravens go, 2 first-round picks. The Falcons say, no, that is too rich for our blood. We're going to wait another year and we're going to give a fuck ton of money to Kirk Cousins, who's injured and broken down, and then bench him after 15 games. But in the end, the Baltimore Ravens, they obviously relented. They gave Lamar Jackson a massive contract, 5 years, $260 million, with a $22.5 million signing bonus and $185 million in guaranteed money. And you want to know the best part of this entire deal? It was brokered by his mother because she acts as his agent. Are we sure that Justin Herbert is a big-time quarterback? Because this guy 2 years ago, in the playoffs against the Jacksonville Jaguars, he had an absolute meltdown, blowing a 27-0 halftime lead. And then, the following year in the playoffs against the Houston Texans, he threw more interceptions with 4 in that game than he did the entire 18-game season combined, where he threw just 3 interceptions. But regardless of how you chop it, the Los Angeles Chargers, they are stuck with Goldilocks at their quarterback because this guy, he just signed a 5-year, $262.5 million contract back in 2023. It included a signing bonus of just $16 million, but it had $135 million in guaranteed money. And his $52.5 million in average annual salary, it was the most in NFL history, surpassing Lamar Jackson. But this guy might just be an absolute choke artist, good stats, bad team with a fantastic hairline, because in his 2 career postseason games, he has thrown just 3 touchdown passes and 4 interceptions. Jared Goff reminds me of a woman at a bar that's a solid 8 out of 10 on the look scale, and you see her from across the room and you think to yourself, wow, that is the most beautiful woman I've ever seen in my entire life. Now, there are 2 reasons for that. 1, you've been drinking excessively. And 2, she's standing next to a group of her friends that are all 5 out of 10s on the look scale. But then all of a sudden, a group of models walk in, certifiable dimes, 10 out of 10, and the competition has risen, and all of a sudden, this 8 out of 10, she looks like a swamp donkey. That is Jared Goff, a very good quarterback who has redefined his entire career from being thought of as a career backup to a fringe franchise quarterback, a very good regular season quarterback that we're not so sure is going to be good in the postseason because he hasn't really proven it. But the only problem is, much like that 8 out of 10 at the bar, you're paying him like he's a superstar franchise quarterback akin to a Patrick Mahomes, making 4 years, $212 million with $170 million in guaranteed money. He led the Lions to a 15-2 regular season and a division title and a first-round bye. But much like a guy who pays a high-end escort $1,000 to have sex with him but busts a nut in under a minute, this guy doesn't perform on the biggest stages. Making a guy nicknamed Mr. Irrelevant one of the highest paid players in NFL history. I mean, what could possibly go wrong? Are we sure that Brock Purdy is even good? I mean, this guy was handed the keys to the kingdom. He's kind of like a glorified game manager. He's got fantastic weapons all around him on offense, one of the best left tackles in NFL history, plus an offensive guru as his head coach. So to give this guy a 5-year, $265 million contract with $181 million in guaranteed money and a full no-trade clause, it feels a little irresponsible. But then again, like, what were the 49ers supposed to do? They needed a quarterback, and they're kind of victims of their own success. They drafted too well, and all their good players, they were all up for contracts at the exact same time. So they were in salary cap hell. And side note, for a franchise that is so good at talent evaluation, what the fuck did they see in Trey Lance? I mean, I am no expert over here. I'm just a guy spewing some thoughts on camera, but I watched like 3 YouTube clips of this guy, and I could tell you he was absolute doo-doo. In fact, I called up Helen Keller, and I was like, Helen, what do you think of Trey Lance? And she's like, well, I can't hear you because I'm deaf, but I'm also blind, but I can tell you this guy sucks at football. When Tua almost died on the field last year, and the year before that, and the year before that, everybody was calling for him to retire from the game of football. And then, when he did it, people were saying he was so brave that he couldn't do that to his teammates, that he had too much love for the game. Yeah, I'm going to call bullshit on that one. I think that the reason, well, the 212 million reasons why he didn't retire were right there in his contract, because for some reason the Miami Dolphins and their owner Stephen Ross, who made way too much money in real estate, but that's another story for another time, they decided to give this guy, who is a completely mediocre quarterback who clearly can't win in cold weather games, a ridiculous contract even after he almost died on the field. And if you're Tua, can you really blame the guy for taking the money and risking his life? I mean, it is generational wealth. He's a lot like Drago out there boxing Rocky, getting his head knocked around. He dies, he dies. It could be worse if you're a Green Bay Packers fan. I mean, you could be a Jacksonville Jaguars fan and have Trevor Lawrence as quarterback, who is also making $55 million a year. But then again, it could also be a lot better, since both Joe Burrow and Josh Allen, they are also making $55 million a year. And Jordan Love, he signed this deal back in 2023. It was 4 years, $220 million with $175 million in guaranteed money. And I'm not going to lie to you guys, even though he hasn't fully lived up to the expectations yet, as a diehard Minnesota Vikings fan, this guy scares me. And I think it might be my own personal shit that I need to work through. The PTSD of the Green Bay Packers getting lucky not once, but twice over the course of the last 30 years and having Hall of Fame quarterback play. It scares me that they might hit it 3 times in a row, and I got to deal with this reoccurring nightmare a little bit longer, because when I watch Jordan Love throw a football, I'm like, this guy's really fucking talented. But then a few times a game, I go, oh, he's actually dumb as hell. But then you also realize he has a really good coach, offensive weapons, a fantastic defense, and if he cuts down on those dumb plays, they're all going to be really terrifying. And that right there, sports fans, is nightmare fuel for your boy. Goldilocks better start stepping up his play, because he certainly is not living up to this 5-year, $275 million contract with $200 million in guaranteed money that he signed back in 2023. And are we sure that Trevor Lawrence is good? Because this guy, he was considered a phenom after his freshman year at Clemson, where he led them to a national championship. But ever since then, what has he really done on a football field? I mean, if he wasn't considered a can't-miss prospect akin to Andrew Luck, would he even still be a starter in the NFL? Because he almost certainly would have not gotten this contract extension from the Jacksonville Jaguars, because they were paying him on his potential as opposed to his play on the field. I mean, entering this year, for his career as a starter in the NFL, he had a 22-38 record. That's the exact same record as Daniel fucking Jones. The good news, if you're a Cincinnati Bengals fan, is you have an absolute stud at the quarterback position. Now, your franchise has loaded him up with weapons. Now, the bad news is you're paying your quarterback $55 million a year, your number 1 wide receiver $40 million a year, and your number 2 wide receiver $30 million a year. That is 44.4% of your entire salary cap allotted to 3 players who are all on the offensive side of the ball, meaning your defense is an absolute fucking dumpster fire, and it's going to take superhuman efforts from your quarterback for you guys to actually compete. But the good news is you guys have the guy for the job. Joey Cool. He has proven time and time again, this guy can light up a scoreboard. And he already looks underpaid just 2 years later, signing a 5-year, $275 million contract with $219 million in guaranteed money back in 2023. Isn't it kind of weird that Josh Allen, Travis Kelce, and Christian McCaffrey are 3 of the most famous football players in the entire world, but they actually might be the second most famous person in their relationship? However, Josh Allen, unlike Travis and Christian, he is without a doubt the richest person in his relationship, especially after signing a 6-year, $330 million contract that included $250 million in guaranteed money. That was the biggest in NFL history, surpassing the dumpster fire of a contract by Deshaun Watson. And unlike Watson, Josh Allen doesn't sexually assault people. Or at least that we're aware of. And he's actually earned his money on the field because this guy, every single year, he seems to be getting better. He won an MVP last year, and he's seemingly knocking on the door every single year to lead the Bills to the promised land. But I'm a little concerned because Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, they clearly have his number. Are we certain that Josh Allen and the Bills aren't like Patrick Ewing and the Knicks of the 90s where they're just up against Michael Jordan and the Bulls, and they will never get over the hump? Besides their incompetent, geriatric, fairly certain racist owner that insists on being a talent evaluator, the other thing that is submarining America's team, aka the Dallas Cowboys, aka one of the greatest sports franchises in the history of North American sports, is their completely mediocre quarterback that they decide to pay like he's a superstar. You think this dude was the second coming of Tom Brady, making $60 million a year? Him being the highest paid player in NFL history is absolutely laughable. For Christ's sake, we all know he's just the black Kirk Cousins. Good stats, bad team guy. So if you want to know why the Dallas Cowboys never win anything, yeah, it might be Jerry Jones calling the shots, but it's because they hand out $240 million contracts over the course of 4 years to guys like Dak Prescott, who have a hard enough time leading his team to the playoffs because it doesn't feel like he's ever healthy. But then once he gets to the playoffs, he's almost guaranteed to shit the bed.